They told us they want to try again in a different area of the Indian Ocean. This was the first definitive proof that the plane had indeed gone down in the Indian Ocean. For 11 long years, the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 has remained one of the biggest mysteries in modern aviation.
Flight MH370 is deemed one of the greatest mysteries in aviation history.
Families were left without answers.
3 generations of my family. This is the extinction of my whole family.
Experts were left puzzled, and the world could only guess what truly happened in those final moments. But now, an underwater drone exploring one of the most remote parts of the ocean has uncovered new evidence. Evidence that could finally shift the entire investigation. What it found has shocked researchers and reopened questions many thought were impossible to solve. And this time, the clues are clearer than ever. Join us in this video as we reveal what this new evidence could mean. The first glimpse beneath the silence. In early 2025, Ocean Infinity's newest fleet pushed into the Seahorse Zone. Aviation's greatest mysteries could soon be solved with a new search commencing for MH370 off the coast of WA. That lonely, almost mythic stretch of ocean where many experts believed the final answer to the MH370 mystery had been hiding for years. Well, Malaysia has announced a search for missing flight MH370 will resume later this month. Their flagship, the Armada 7806, drifted over waters so deep they seemed endless. More than 6,000 meters below, there was only darkness, pressure strong enough to crush steel, and a silence untouched since the Earth first shifted into its modern form. Into that crushing quiet, engineers released a set of advanced autonomous underwater vehicles, machines designed to survive exactly where humans couldn't. Each drone slipped downward at a steady pace, its instruments waking up one by one as it entered a world of ridges, cliffs, and jagged valleys carved by millions of years of tectonic activity. For hours, the sonar feeds showed nothing but the soft, grainy texture of thick seabed sediment. Then something changed. One AUV caught a reflection that didn't match any natural formation. Analysts crowded around the monitors as the sonar image sharpened into a long, flat shape nearly 30 meters in length, half buried in the seafloor. A second sweep confirmed it. Smooth, metallic, and unmistakably aligned with the dimensions of a commercial aircraft wing. The team checked the coordinates against the WSPR-derived path. The match was perfect. Excitement flashed across the control room, but everyone knew how dangerous false hope could be. They'd chased illusions before. Rocks that looked like engines, shadows that mimicked man-made debris. To be sure, they deployed another drone outfitted with high-resolution imaging. This one flew straight over the target, and its synthetic aperture sonar revealed details no rock could imitate. Ribbed internal structures, torn metal edges, twisted panels frozen in time. And it didn't stop there. Within a 15-kilometer radius, the drone spotted 2 more anomalies, one resembling a fuselage segment, the other a tail assembly. The findings were classified instantly. Verification protocols kicked in. If these pieces were real, it meant something unthinkably important. The first identifiable wreckage from MH370 had been lying in a place no previous mission had ever reached. But before this new evidence, what was initially found that brought hope about the MH370 mystery? Keep watching to find out. When the ocean first spoke. For 16 long months, the Indian Ocean held its silence. No answers, no clues, nothing that could ease the ache of uncertainty. Then, on a quiet morning in July 2015, something finally changed. A man walking along the eastern shore of Reunion Island noticed a strange object tangled in seaweed. It was curved, nearly 2 meters long, and coated in barnacles. Its edges were torn and softened by months of drifting through salt water. Locals assumed it belonged to a fishing boat until aviation experts arrived. Within hours, the world heard a sentence many had stopped believing they'd ever hear again. The debris was a flopperon from a Boeing 777, and only one aircraft of that type was missing. After months of unbearable silence, the ocean had whispered its first truth. The discovery shook the investigation awake. Engineers examined the flopperon closely, studying how the hinges had snapped and how the metal showed fatigue marks from a violent, high-speed impact with water. Nothing about its condition suggested a mid-air explosion. Instead, the shape and damage pointed toward a controlled but catastrophic descent. That one fragment shifted the entire search from theories to physical evidence. In Malaysia, the news spread with the force of a lightning strike. Families cried through press conferences, their grief reopened yet sharpened with new clarity. Officials confirmed the find with solemn calm. Soon after, the flopperon was flown to France, where BEA, the French Air Accident Investigation Agency, launched a detailed forensic study. Technicians inspected every rivet and serial arcing, tracing each one back to the aircraft's original manufacturing records. The conclusion was undeniable. Speaking English. The fragment belonged to MH370. Oceanographers stepped forward next, hoping to retrace the flopperon's journey. Using satellite data, they built simulations of Indian Ocean currents, modeling how winds, tides, and spinning gyres could have carried the debris nearly 4,000 kilometers from a possible crash site to Reunion. It wasn't random drift. It was a path shaped by time and the ocean's restless motion. Soon, more pieces began emerging on distant shores. A section of the horizontal stabilizer appeared in Mozambique. A piece of the cabin interior washed up in Madagascar. Another fragment, believed to be part of an engine cowling, was found in Tanzania. Each item bore its own pattern of tears, bends, and salt scoring, each one a message from the deep. Together, they formed a fragile breadcrumb trail scattered across half an ocean. Scientists from several countries worked together to trace these drifting clues backward. Powerful computer models ran thousands of simulations, adjusting for wind speed, sea temperatures, and even the Coriolis effect again and again. The paths pointed to the same place, a narrow corridor of deep ocean southwest of Australia, near the area already known as the Seventh Arc. It was a landscape of underwater mountains in trenches plunging more than 5,000 meters into darkness. For investigators, this was both a breakthrough and a torment. The fragments proved the aircraft had met its fate, but they didn't reveal where the main wreckage rested. It was like finding ashes without knowing where the fire had burned. Still, the discoveries reignited pressure from the world. People demanded a renewed search. Behind closed doors, private companies began offering new solutions, machines capable of going where humans never could. Autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, sleek torpedo-shaped robots capable of slipping into the abyss with silent precision. Unlike older systems that had to be towed slowly behind ships, these AUVs roamed freely, guided by sophisticated onboard computers. Each one carried multi-beam sonar, high-resolution imaging tools, and three-dimensional mapping systems. They could dive nearly 6,000 meters down into a world where sunlight is only a memory. The machines that challenged the deep. For 3 relentless years, the Indian Ocean defeated every effort to uncover MH370's fate. Ships crossed millions of square kilometers, dragging sonar equipment through violent seas, returning each time with nothing but static and shadows. But in 2018, everything changed. The search entered a new era, one not led by human endurance, but by machines built to survive where no person could. Ocean Infinity, a private Texas-based company, believed it could succeed where entire nations had failed. They arrived with something the world had never seen on this scale, a fleet of autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, sleek, torpedo-shaped robots capable of slipping into the abyss with silent precision. Unlike older systems that had to be towed slowly behind ships, these AUVs roamed freely, guided by sophisticated onboard computers. Each one carried multi-beam sonar, high-resolution imaging tools, and three-dimensional mapping systems. They could dive nearly 6,000 meters down into a world where sunlight is only a memory. At the heart of the operation was the Seabed Constructor, a ship built almost like a floating space station for the deep sea. From its open deck, engineers released the AUVs one after another into the freezing waters of the southern Indian Ocean. Ocean Infinity's deal with Malaysia was as bold as its technology, a no-find, no-fee mission. They would only be paid if they discovered the wreckage. It was a gamble, a test of both nerve and innovation. Each dive began with engineers programming coordinates into a drone's navigation system. The moment it submerged, the robot disappeared into the dark, sweeping the seabed in perfect grids. Every ping of the sonar painted a digital picture of the ocean floor, its trenches, cliffs, and plains, landscapes no human had ever laid eyes on. Data streamed back to the Seabed Constructor, where analysts worked through the nights, studying shapes and shadows that might finally reveal MH370. For weeks, the crew battled savage seas and unpredictable weather. The Indian Ocean is one of the planet's harshest environments, with strong currents, towering underwater ridges, and unpredictable storms that could turn the mission sideways in minutes. Yet, despite everything, Ocean Infinity's robotic fleet managed to search an astonishing 112,000 kilometers, nearly matching all previous government searches combined. What they uncovered was haunting. Miles of silt-covered plains broken by deep fissures where sonar vanished into voids. Occasionally, the sensors picked up metallic shapes, igniting hope, only for them to be revealed as rock formations or geological quirks. Hope rose and fell, but the work continued. And even though the 2018 mission ended without a breakthrough, it marked a turning point. For the first time, humanity had mapped parts of the deep ocean in detail that once seemed impossible. Ocean Infinity didn't stop. Their AUVs grew smarter with every mission, using artificial intelligence to refine search patterns. Over the next years, the company built a second generation of machines, faster, more autonomous, and less dependent on human oversight. By 2024, the technological leap had materialized. The Armada 7806, a vessel capable of coordinating multiple AUEs remotely. It didn't need human pilots guiding each dive. Instead, using satellite links and machine learning, it operated like a digital hive mind, directing its robotic fleet with perfect synchronization. This was not just exploration, it was evolution. The Armada's upgraded AUVs carried powerful tools, sub-bottom profilers that could scan beneath the seafloor and side-can sonar sharp enough to distinguish aircraft debris from coral. These systems didn't just see the ocean, they read it, revealing patterns hidden beneath layers of sand and sediment. With this advanced fleet ready, scientists refined new models predicting the most likely crash zone. Their calculations pointed toward a deeper, rougher region than ever before, a section of seafloor near a trench ominously known as the Seahorse Zone. It was a place previous missions hadn't reached, a place where the ocean kept its secrets buried under crushing pressure. 11 years after MH370 vanished, technology stood on the brink of uncovering the truth. What began as a human tragedy had become a machine-driven quest for answers. Somewhere in those dark waters, the final story of MH370 lay waiting to be revealed. But let's go back to the very beginning. What happened to Flight MH370? Let's find out. The night the world lost Flight 370. It is the greatest aviation mystery of all time. Malaysian Airlines Flight MH370. Flight MH370 began like any other long-haul red-eye leaving Kuala Lumpur. It was the early hours of March 8, 2014, and the Boeing 777 was scheduled to make its routine journey to Beijing, a flight Malaysia Airlines had operated countless times before. On board were 2 experienced pilots, 10 cabin crew members, 227 passengers from multiple countries, and more than 14,000 kilograms of cargo. Nothing about the departure suggested that this night would become one of the greatest mysteries in aviation history. The aircraft lifted off from runway 32R at 00:42 a.m., climbing smoothly through Malaysia's night sky. Air traffic controllers cleared it to ascend to 18,000 feet, heading toward its first waypoint, IGI, just off the coast in the Gulf of Thailand. Communications during this phase were normal. The first officer spoke while the flight was still on the ground, and after takeoff, the captain handled the radio calls. At 00:46, the flight was cleared to climb higher to 35,000 feet, and the crew confirmed reaching that altitude just after 1 a.m. The plane's final automated ACARS message was transmitted at 1:06 a.m., reporting a healthy fuel load, 43,800 kilograms remaining. Everything appeared routine. Then came the final spoken words from the cockpit at 1:19 a.m. when Kuala Lumpur radar handed the aircraft off to air traffic control in Vietnam. Good night, Malaysian 370. Those would be the last confirmed words ever heard from Flight 370. The crew never checked in with Ho Chi Minh City. When Vietnamese controllers tried contacting the aircraft, there was no reply. Another pilot flying nearby attempted to relay a message, but all he heard was static and faint mumbling. Something was wrong. At 12:31, as MH370 crossed Agari, its transponder stopped transmitting. 5 seconds later, it disappeared from civilian radar entirely. Within a minute, the aircraft was no longer visible to Malaysia's controllers or their counterparts in Vietnam. But it was not gone. Not yet. Malaysia's military radar, operating independently of civilian systems, caught sight of the plane turning sharply to the right, then sweeping into a long left arc that sent it back across the Malaysian peninsula. It flew over the Strait of Malacca, passed south of Penang, and then tracked northwest along established air routes at altitudes between 29,000 and 35,000 feet. Civilian radar at Kota Bharu detected an unidentified aircraft during this time, matching the path recorded by military radar. By 2:22 a.m., the aircraft reached the edge of Malaysians' radar coverage and vanished into darkness for good. From that point on, only satellite data would suggest where it might have gone. Across Southeast Asia, confusion spread. Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam all detected pieces of MH370's early flight path, but political sensitivities and reluctance to reveal military capabilities slowed the release of information. Indonesia's early warning systems saw the plane before its transponder stopped, but offered no data afterward. Vietnam noted the moment MH370 turned back to the west and said they informed Malaysia twice. Thailand's radar detected an aircraft without an identifying transponder code, but could not confirm when the signal faded. Even Australia's powerful JOR radar system, capable of seeing thousands of kilometers, had been offline that night. In less than an hour, MH370 had slipped through some of the most heavily monitored airspace in Asia, leaving behind a trail of questions and only fragments of data. The world didn't know it yet, but this quiet sequence of disappearances would set off one of the largest and most expensive searches in history, a search that would stretch across continents, oceans, and ultimately more than a decade. After the plane vanished, what silent signals hinted at the truth? Keep watching to find out. The silent signals that shouldn't have been there. As investigators pieced together the timeline, one detail stood out, something that made the disappearance of MH370 even more unsettling. After the final ACAR's transmission at 1:06, the aircraft simply went dark. The satellite communication system, which normally stayed active through the entire flight, suddenly went offline. Whether it was a power interruption or something more deliberate, no one could say. What is known is that during the aircraft's mysterious turn away from its scheduled route, the system remained completely silent. But at 2:25, nearly an hour and a half later, something unexpected happened. Above the Andaman Sea, the satellite link suddenly rebooted and sent a log-on request, the first electronic sign of life since everything went quiet in Inmarsat. The satellite company monitoring the channel detected the signal immediately. To them, the aircraft was still out there, still flying in the darkness, even though no one knew where it was, and no one in the cockpit responded to multiple incoming calls. For the next 6 hours, MH370 continued to handshake with the satellite, answering hourly status pings like a ghost plane drifting across the sky. Two ground-to-aircraft calls at 239 and 713 rang unanswered in the cockpit. The last confirmed exchange, a status request at 8:10, was routine. But then came one final chilling moment at 8:19. The aircraft sent a fresh log-on request, as if rebooting again. The ground station acknowledged it at 8:19:37, and then absolute silence. When Inmarsat attempted another ping at 9:15, MH370 never responded. Those signals led investigators to one devastating conclusion. The plane had likely flown until its fuel ran dry somewhere deep in the southern Indian Ocean. But the story of that night was far messier on the ground. Confusion swept through air traffic control centers from Kuala Lumpur to Ho Chi Minh City. Radar reports conflicted and operators traded calls insisting the aircraft was in Cambodian airspace, even though Cambodian controllers had no contact with it at all. Malaysia Airlines Operations Center, relying on outdated data projections, kept reassuring controllers that MH370 was fine. By the time Kuala Lumpur activated its rescue center at 0530, more than 4 hours had passed since the plane vanished from primary radar. Malaysia Airlines didn't issue a public statement until 7:24, claiming they had lost contact at 2:40, ironically while MH370 was still flying over the Indian Ocean. Search crews were deployed in the wrong sea, scanning the South China Sea while the aircraft continued its silent journey far to the west and south. When Malaysia's then Prime Minister Najib Razak finally addressed the world on the 24th of March, he delivered the news families had dreaded. According to the data, MH370's last known position was in the southern Indian Ocean, a place with no landing sites, no radio towers, and no survivors. Families in Beijing were gathered and told the aircraft was lost, some receiving the message via text. Months later, officials formally declared the incident an accident, presuming all 239 passengers and crew dead. Boeing 777 with 239 people on board simply vanished. Yet, sightings flooded the media, fishermen reporting low-flying jets, oil rig workers describing burning objects, and island residents claiming they saw a massive aircraft roaring overhead. None were ever confirmed. Each new report added another layer of mystery, but none brought the world closer to understanding what happened during those silent hours between 1:06 and 8:19. And now, with Ocean Infinity uncovering what may be the first true pieces of wreckage, those unexplained signals and that final haunting log request are being examined with fresh urgency. Amid mysterious signals, what secrets hide behind the cockpit door? Let's find out. The human puzzle behind the cockpit door. As search teams mapped the possible crash zone and analysts struggled to interpret the aircraft's final satellite handshakes, investigators on the ground turned their attention to the people aboard Flight MH370, especially those with access to the controls. Malaysian police began with the cockpit. Officers searched the homes of both pilots. police searched MH370 pilots' homes as evidence suggests it was hijacked, reviewing their personal histories, financial activity, digital devices, and hours of CCTV footage. According to the preliminary report released in March 2015, there were no unusual transactions, no sudden large withdrawals, no behavior suggesting stress or radicalization. On camera, the pilots moved calmly and naturally, showing none of the emotional volatility sometimes associated with premeditated acts. But despite these official findings, a growing number of investigators, particularly in the United States, argued that human intervention remained the most likely explanation. At some point early in the flight, someone had deliberately reprogrammed the autopilot, redirecting the Boeing 777 away from its planned route and out into the vast empty Indian Ocean. And if it wasn't a hijacker hidden among the passengers, then suspicion inevitably circled back to the cockpit. Media reports claimed Malaysian police had privately identified Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah as the prime suspect. Should human interference be proven, a view echoed years later by former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott. Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott text expressed fresh hope Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 may be found. In a 2020 documentary, Abbott revealed that senior Malaysian officials had believed almost from the start that the aircraft's disappearance was an assassination, self-harm carried out by the captain. Malaysian authorities denied withholding anything, but the revelation reopened a debate many hoped had been put to rest. In 2016, that debate intensified when a confidential document surfaced showing that the FBI had discovered a simulated flight path on Zahar's home flight simulator, one that eerily matched the aircraft's theorized route into the Indian Ocean. The ATSB confirmed the discovery, and the Malaysian government later acknowledged it as well. But while officials insisted it was nothing sinister, retired engineers and pilots like Jean-Luc Marne and Patrick Bleeley began presenting their own detailed analysis, arguing strongly that the pilot's self-harm theory best matched the technical evidence. What investigators could confirm was unsettling. The SOTCOM system functioned normally from pre-flight until it acknowledged its last APRS message at 1:07. Sometime shortly afterward, power to the satellite data unit was interrupted. The final report later concluded that the loss of communication before the aircraft's diversion was likely caused either by the systems being manually turned off or by a deliberate interruption of power. Malaysia's Prime Minister stated outright that the radar transponder and data transmission systems were deliberately disabled. And then at 2:25, the SDU suddenly rebooted and reconnected to the satellite just as the aircraft made its ghostly arc toward the south. Investigators also examined every passenger. One flight engineer initially drew attention due to his skill set, but he was quickly cleared. The discovery that 2 Iranian passengers had boarded using stolen passports on Flight 370 sparked alarm around the world. But Interpol later confirmed they were asylum seekers, not terrorists. China, which had the largest number of citizens aboard, vetted every passenger and publicly ruled out sabotage or terrorism. Attention then turned to the cargo. MH370 was carrying more than 10,000 kilograms of goods, including 4 containers of mangosteen and a shipment of lithium-ion batteries weighing over 2,400 kilograms. Lithium batteries are known hazards, capable of triggering intense fires if they overheat, but investigators found nothing to suggest improper packaging or mishandling. Even so, their presence fueled countless theories online. Meanwhile, aviation experts continued debating what happened during the aircraft's final hours. An in-flight upset, a glide event, and a hypoxia scenario were all examined by the ATSB. Their conclusion was clear. An unresponsive crew or hypoxia event best matched the evidence, explaining how the plane continued on a steady course for 5 hours with no communication and no significant deviations, likely operating on autopilot until fuel starvation. The aircraft's recovered flaperon later revealed that the landing flaps were not extended, contradicting theories of a controlled ditching. This supported the idea that MH370 entered a high-speed spiral dive after the engines flamed out and the autopilot disengaged. In 2018, the ATSB reaffirmed this view, noting that if the plane was under human control at the end, that control was not very successful. Yet, even with these findings, no single theory commands universal agreement. Each explanation answers one question while raising another. And now, with possible wreckage emerging from the depths near the Seahorse Zone, the debate around human involvement is gathering momentum once again. Because if the plane went down in one final uncontrolled plunge, investigators must still determine what or who set it on that doomed path to begin with. Beyond the cockpit, how did MH370 capture the world's imagination? Keep watching to find out. A mystery captured worldwide. The disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 has become one of the biggest mysteries in modern aviation, captivating the world and inspiring countless documentaries, books, and shows. Within weeks of the tragedy, filmmakers and journalists began exploring the story, seeking to make sense of what happened. On the 6th of April 2014, the Smithsonian Channel aired Malaysia 370, The Plane That Vanished, a 1-hour documentary delving into the flight's sudden disappearance. Just 10 days later, the Discovery Channel broadcast Flight 370, The Missing Links, another 1-hour investigation exploring the aircraft, its passengers, and the enormous search effort that followed. BBC Two joined the discussion with its Horizon episode, Where is Flight MH370? On 17 June 2014, the program examined the disappearance, the possible scenarios behind it, and the technologies that might prevent such incidents in the future, including flight recorder streaming and ADS-B tracking. It highlighted the work of Ocean Shield, which had spent 2 months scanning 850 kilometers of ocean, yet far north of the hotspot predicted by Inmarsat data, near 28 degrees south, where the plane was most likely to have ended its flight. In 2023, American comedian Jocelyn Chia faced an investigation by Malaysian authorities after joking about MH370 during a stand-up performance in New York. Malaysian police sought Interpol's help to determine her location and identity. MH370 has left an indelible mark on global consciousness, not just as a story of loss, but as a puzzle, a cautionary tale, and a cultural touchstone that continues to fascinate, horrify, and inspire creative minds around the world. Speaking English. As the mystery spread worldwide, could the resumption of the search finally uncover answers? Stay tuned to find out. The search begins again. After 11 long years, after more than a decade of uncertainty, Malaysia made a stunning announcement. The search for MH370 would resume on the 30th of December, giving new hope to families who have waited 11 painful years for answers. The decision marked the start of a fresh 55-day mission, one that had actually begun months earlier in March, but was forced to pause when violent weather made the waters too dangerous to explore. This new chapter, Malaysian officials said, showed the country's renewed commitment to bringing closure to the loved ones of all 239 people who vanished on that quiet night in 2014. For many families, it was the first real sign of progress in years. Once again, the mission would be led by Ocean Infinity, the deep-sea exploration company known for its bold, no-find, no-fee approach. Under the new agreement, the company would only be paid if it succeeded, up to $70 million if it finally located the wreckage. It was a high-risk, high-pressure deal, but one Ocean Infinity had accepted before. earlier searches had already pushed human and technological limits. Nations from around the world joined the original hunt, forming what became the largest search operation in aviation history. 60 ships, 50 aircraft, and 26 countries, all scanning seas, skies, and coastlines. But despite years of effort, the operation was called off in 2017, leaving behind more questions than answers. Ocean Infinity returned once in 2018 with its first generation of autonomous underwater vehicles. For 3 relentless months, they swept the ocean floor with incredible precision, mapping a stretch of seabed larger than anything previously attempted. Yet even that mission ended in silence. Now, with stronger machines, sharper sonar, and new predictions pointing to an unexplored trench, the company is preparing to try again. And after 11 years of theories, dead ends, and heartbreak, the world is watching closely, because this time, the machines diving into the dark may finally surface with the truth. So, do you think after 11 years there will be a discovery? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you for watching this deep dive into the MH370 mystery. We hope you found it as fascinating as the search itself. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible stories. Click the next video on your screen to explore more shocking discoveries and mysteries from around the